Hey there, it's Katie from CreativeHealingPhilly.com, and if your teen is self-critical, then this video is for you. So today we're going to talk about the teens who hate the way they look, that might be making self-critical comments about their body or their appearance, or who feel like a failure and say negative things about themselves or to themselves if they get a poor grade on a test, or if something doesn't work out in a social situation. And what we see with these teens who are self-critical, who are really hard on themselves, is that it goes into one of two categories. They may shut down and start to think, what's the point? Why should I bother? I'm not even going to try anymore. Or the other end of that spectrum is they may overcompensate and work themselves up to the bone, stay up until midnight completing work, never feel like it's good enough, and continue to be super hard on themselves as a means to try and motivate themselves to perfection, which we know is not a possibility. So here we go. I'm going to blow your mind with a statement that you've probably never heard before, because I'm willing to bet that most of our goals as parents and professionals is to increase or to boost self-esteem, right? We talk about that idea all the time. But here's what I want you to know. Boosting self-esteem is just a Band-Aid, right? It's just putting a Band-Aid on a bigger wound, because here's the thing. Most professionals will help your teen track their negative self-talk. They'll help them learn to tune into what they're saying to themselves, and then learn some thought replacement techniques to try and replace those negative or critical thoughts with more positive or helpful ones. They'll help them learn to be their own cheerleader. But there's two things that I want to tell you about this. In working with hundreds of teens in our community and doing this for years and years, working specifically with teens, number one, it doesn't work because the thoughts always come back. And yes, it's a practice. Yes, we can practice acknowledging that thought and then replacing it with a more positive thought. But the second piece of this is that for teens especially, this feels fake. And we all know that teens have that BS meter where they can notice something that feels fake, which leads to discouragement because it's not a quick fix. It doesn't work right away. And who wants to replace the same thought over and over and over again, right? So it's kind of like the idea of, if I said to you right now, try your best to not think about a pink elephant, you'd have to think about that pink elephant before you try to not think about that pink elephant. And it's the same thing with thought replacement when we're talking about negative to positive self-talk. You still have to think about and feel the negative thought before you can replace it with a positive one. And so that feels discouraging for our teens. What's more is that when they have that thought and then they have to go through the action of replacing it, it inadvertently reinforces this idea that there's something wrong with them for having that thought to begin with, the fact that they have to change it, and that further increases feelings of low self-esteem. So here's the solution. Let's foster self-compassion instead of self-esteem. And what this means is treating yourself with kindness, thinking about how you would talk to your best friend, and considering, do you talk to yourself the same way? Now, this is a little bit different than thought replacement in that, if you got a B on a test, you might be saying something to yourself like, oh my gosh, I'm such a failure. I can't believe I didn't get an A. I can't believe I didn't study more. You'd start to verbally beat yourself up a little bit. But if your friend got a B on a test, you might say something like, a B is a pretty good grade. I know you wanted an A, but a B is acceptable and you can try harder for the next one. So why is it that we can talk to our friends in a way that's compassionate and kind, but when we don't measure up to our own expectations, it leads us into this spiral of shame and negative self-talk. So number one is treating yourself with kindness and thinking about, how would I talk to a friend and how can I learn to talk to myself in the same way? The second piece of this is recognizing that self-doubt and self-criticism are a totally normal part of being human. So the goal for any of us isn't to get rid of these thoughts, but to recognize them without letting them define us. And this is why groups can be so helpful, especially for our teens, because it helps them to recognize that they're not alone in thinking and experiencing what they're going through, and that there's nothing wrong with them for having these feelings. It's a really beautiful thing when one of my teens can share an experience that they're having, and another teen, at least one in the group, can say, yes, Yes, sometimes they'll say retweet. Yes, I got that. I understood that. I feel you, because they understand each other in a way that makes them feel like they're not weird, bad, wrong, or different for having self-doubt, for criticizing themselves, for feeling down on themselves, for being frustrated. And normalizing those things as part of a human experience is so, so important when we're talking about being self-compassionate, because it means that there's nothing wrong with you. It means that you're not broken, that you don't need fixing, that it's all about acknowledging these thoughts without getting attached to them or without letting them define us. So, getting a B on a test, which is something that comes up a lot with our perfectionists, doesn't mean that you're a failure. Failing a test doesn't mean that you're a failure. It means that you didn't do as well as you wanted to, and there's a way to improve on that, but it's not defining you as a failure as a person. So let's be real. Remember I said teens have that BS meter. They can totally sniff out when we're not being honest with them. But here's what I want you to know. The research says that having an accurate self-perception has been proven to be way more effective than having high self-esteem. And part of this is because when we focus on self-esteem as a metric and then we have an off day, we automatically believe that there's something wrong with us. This is what I was just talking about. It hinders our ability to have an accurate sense of self because we're always basing it on some kind of external validation or some experience that we're having in our lives. The other end of that spectrum is that when we typically rely on validation or doing well to boost our self-esteem, and then we don't excel at one of those tests, it shakes the very foundation of our identity and who we are. And for teens, when their developmental task is figuring out who they are, this can become really dangerous, and it can lead to changes in mood and urges and behaviors that become concerning for us as parents and professionals. So if you have a teen who's experiencing a dip in self-esteem and could benefit from learning the tools and skills to be more self-compassionate, to learn how to treat themselves with kindness, to learn how to accept the ups and downs in life and have the skills to cope with them rather than to try and push it away, push it down, and then have it pop up when they don't want it to, right? We all know that we can't change or make feelings go away, but we can learn to cope with them and create a life that's worth living and that your teen loves and engages in and is effective for them. I'd love to invite you to connect with us. We're enrolling now for our Connect, Cope, and Create summer camp. That is a week of groups and activities that are designed to help your teen go from overwhelmed, stressed, and unhappy with themselves to learning to cope with life's ups and downs, learning how to tune into how they think and feel, and how to be in control of their feelings rather than let the feelings control them and define who they are. If this sounds like you, I'd love to connect with you. Go ahead and click or go visit us at creativehealingphilly.com/summer-camp, and we will talk to you soon. Have a great day. Bye.